The ocean was a deceptive beast. One moment, it cradled the luxury cruise ship Azure Serenity like a gentle lover, its surface shimmering under the golden kiss of the setting sun. The next, the sky split open with a thunderous roar, and the waves rose like vengeful gods. Lucas Mercer, a travel photographer with a taste for adventure, clung to the railings as the deck tilted violently beneath him. Screams tore through the air, swallowed by the howling wind. The ship groaned, metal twisting as the storm's fury wrenched it apart, then darkness, cold, and silence. When Lucas gasped awake, his lungs burning with salt water, the storm had passed. The sea was eerily calm, the wreckage of the Azure Serenity scattered like broken bones across the water. He floated on a piece of debris, his body numb, his mind fogged with disbelief. Then he saw her. A figure emerged from the depths, her skin glowing faintly under the moonlight, as if kissed by the sea itself. Her hair, long and dark as the ocean's abyss, fanned around her like liquid shadow. But it was her eyes that seized him, golden, ancient, and brimming with something unreadable. A mermaid. Lucas' breath hitched. She drifted closer, her tail scaled in iridescent blues and greens, rippling beneath the surface. Her lips parted, not in song, but in a whisper that sent chills down his spine. "You shouldn't be here." Before he could speak, a deep, resonant growl vibrated through the water. The mermaid's eyes widened, her body tensing as she turned toward the sound. From the darkness below, another figure rose, larger, fiercer, his scaled torso marked with scars, his gaze burning with possessive fury. "Amaris," the merman hissed, his voice like the rumble of a distant storm. "You were warned." The mermaid Amaris flinched, but didn't retreat. Instead, she cast one last glance at Lucas, her golden eyes filled with regret and something dangerously like longing. Then, with a flick of her tail, she vanished into the depths, her husband following like a shadow, leaving Lucas alone with the chilling realization that the sea had spared him, for now. But the storm was far from over. The night swallowed the sea whole. Lucas clung to the shattered remains of the ship's deck, his fingers raw from salt and splinters. The mermaid, Amaris, had disappeared as quickly as she had appeared, leaving only the echo of her voice and the weight of her husband's warning. But the ocean wasn't done with him yet. A low, haunting melody curled through the water, wrapping around him like a serpent's embrace. It wasn't the fabled siren's call meant to drown sailors in madness. No, this was different. A whisper, a plea. Follow. Lucas' pulse spiked. He shouldn't trust it. Every instinct screamed at him to stay still, to wait for rescue. But then he saw her again, just a flicker of movement beneath the waves, the glint of golden eyes watching him from the dark. Against all reason, he slid off the wreckage and into the water. The cold hit him like a blade, but the melody pulled him deeper, guiding him through the blackness. His limbs burned, his lungs screamed, but he swam until his hands scraped against jagged rock. A cave, hidden beneath the waves, its entrance shrouded by twisting kelp. Amaris waited inside. The cavern glowed with bioluminescent algae, casting eerie blue light over her bare shoulders, the curve of her tail draped over a smooth stone. She looked at him with an expression torn between guilt and hunger. "You're still alive," she murmured as if surprised. Lucas coughed up seawater, his voice rough. "Why did you save me?" A shadow passed over her face. "I didn't." A ripple disturbed the water behind him. Lucas turned just in time to see the merman emerge from the depths, his massive form blocking the exit. His black-scaled tail coiled like a predator's, his eyes burning with cold fury. "You brought him here," the merman snarled at Amaris. She lifted her chin, defiance flashing in her gaze. He was going to die. He was supposed to. Lucas' blood turned to ice. The merman bared sharpened teeth. "Humans don't survive these waters, not unless we let them." Amaris moved between them, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Kale, please." You know the law, Kale interrupted, his grip tightening on the trident at his side. If he sees us, he dies, unless... His gaze slid to Lucas, calculating, unless he becomes one of us. Lucas stumbled back. What? Amaris' expression twisted with something like sorrow. There's a price for secrets, human, and the sea always collects. Kale grinned, slow and cruel. Swim deeper, little man. Let the water decide if you live, or if you feed the abyss. The cave walls seem to close in. The melody returned, darker now, a dirge, a warning, and Lucas realized, too late, that he wasn't just shipwrecked. He was trapped. The water in the cave grew heavier, pressing against Lucas' chest like a vice. Kel's trident glinted in the eerie blue glow, its points hovering inches from his throat. Amaris watched, her golden eyes flickering with conflict. You don't have much time, Kel rumbled. The change is painful. Most humans don't survive it. Lucas swallowed hard. Change. Amaris drifted closer, her voice barely above a whisper. To walk among us, you must become like us. The sea must claim you fully. A sharp laugh escaped Lucas' lips. You're saying I'll turn into a merman. If the ocean allows it, Kale said, his grin widening. If not, your bones will wash up on some forgotten shore. Lucas' mind raced. He had no weapons, no way out. The cave's entrance was blocked, and even if he could swim past Kale, he'd never make it to the surface in time. His lungs were already burning. Amaris reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist. Her touch sent an electric jolt through him, warm despite the frigid water. There's another way, she murmured. Kel's tail lashed, stirring the water into a violent swirl. Amaris. His voice was a warning. She ignored him, her gaze locked on Lucas. Swear yourself to me. Not to the sea, not to him, to me. Kel's roar shook the cavern. You dare. He'll be bound to my will. Amaris snapped. Not a threat. A servant. Lucas pulse pounded in his ears. A servant. He wasn't even sure what that meant, but the alternative was death, or worse. Kel's grip on the trident tightened. For a heartbeat, Lucas was certain he would strike. Then, with a sound like grinding stone, the merman lowered his weapon. Do it, he growled, but if he betrays you, I'll carve the flesh from his bones myself. Amaris didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted a hand to her mouth and bit down hard on her own wrist. Dark blood swirled into the water like ink. Drink, she commanded. Lucas recoiled. What? If you want to live. The blood curled toward him, thick and unnatural. He hesitated. Then, with a final gasp of air, he let the current drag it into his mouth. The effect was instant. Fire erupted in his veins. His muscles seized, his vision blurring as his body twisted in the water. He tried to scream, but the sound was stolen by the sea. His legs, oh God, his legs were fusing together, skin stretching, bones cracking. Amaris gripped his shoulders, her voice the only anchor in the storm of agony. Breathe, Lucas, breathe. He sucked in a desperate gasp and realized, with dizzying horror, that he wasn't choking. He was breathing water. Kale watched, his expression unreadable. Now you belong to the deep, he said, and to her. Lucas looked down, where his legs had been. A long, scaled tail now shimmered for him, yet terrifyingly his. Amaris' fingers traced the new ridges of his gills, her voice soft. Come, before the others find us. Others? But she was already pulling him deeper into the black, Kale circling behind them like a sentinel. And Lucas, with no choice but to follow, swam into the abyss. The deeper they swam, the heavier the water felt, thick with pressure, with secrets. Bioluminescent creatures flickered in the gloom like dying stars, casting fleeting light on ruins half buried in the seabed. Broken pillars, shattered statues with hollow eyes. This was a graveyard. Lucas knew tail moved with instinct he didn't understand, but his mind reeled. Every stroke forward felt like another step into a nightmare. Amaris led the way, her form cutting through the dark with effortless grace, while Kale lingered behind, a silent, brooding shadow. Then light, a city, not the ruins of human ships, but something older. Grand structures of coral and bone rose from the ocean floor, towers spiraling like twisted conch shells. Merfolk glided between them, their scales flashing in hues of deep violet and blood red, and at the center of it all loomed a throne of jagged black rock, where a massive figure sat, his tail coiled beneath him like a serpent ready to strike. The king. Amaris tensed. "Don't speak unless he asks you directly," she whispered. "And don't look him in the eyes." Too late. The king's gaze locked onto Lucas, and the water itself seemed to shudder. His face was carved with scars, his crown made from the spines of some long-dead Leviathan. Amaris. His voice was a tidal wave, crushing. "You were forbidden to bring outsiders here." Kale surged forward. She bound him, "My king. He is no longer human." Murmurs rippled through the gathered merfolk. Lucas felt their stares like knives against his skin. The king's nostrils flared. "Bound. To you." Amaris lifted her chin. "To my blood. My will." A dangerous silence followed. Then the king leaned forward, his teeth bared. "Then prove it." Before Lucas could react, Amaris turned to him, her golden eyes burning with something fierce. "Kneel." The command hit him like a physical force. His body moved without permission, tail curling beneath him as he bowed his head. The king watched, unblinking. Interesting, but blood binding is not enough. The human still has a mind of his own. His lip curled. "Unless you wish to fix that." Amaris went very still. "What are you asking?" The king's smile was slow, cruel. "You know the ritual. Drown his memories in the deep. Make him truly yours." Lucas' pulse spiked. "Drown his memories." Amaris hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. Kel's hand clamped onto Lucas' shoulder, claws digging in. "She doesn't have the stomach for it," he sneered. "But I do." Panic exploded in Lucas' chest. He thrashed, but Kel's grip was iron. Amaris' eyes met his, wide with something like regret. Then the world went black as Kel's fist crashed into his skull. The last thing Lucas heard was the king's laughter, echoing through the water like a sinking ship's final groan. And then nothing. Consciousness returned in fractured pieces. A dull ache pulsed behind Lucas' temples, his body heavy as if weighed down by chains. He tried to move, but his limbs refused to obey. The water around him was dark, colder here, wherever here was. Then a voice. "You shouldn't have come." Amaris. Her silhouette hovered above him, backlit by a faint, ghostly glow. They were in a cavern, smaller than the throne room but no less ominous. The walls were lined with jagged shells, their edges sharp enough to flay skin. Lucas tried to speak, but only bubbles escaped his lips. His gills flared instinctively, drawing in water, yet his chest burned as if he were suffocating. "The binding is incomplete," Amaris murmured, more to herself than to him. Kale rushed it. "If we don't finish the ritual, your human mind will reject the change ... and you'll die." Lucas' vision swam. Die. He had barely processed becoming something not human. Now he had to face losing even his thoughts. Amaris reached out, her fingers brushing his forehead. "There's a way to preserve you, but you have to want it." A flicker of movement at the cavern's entrance made her tense. Kale loomed in the shadows, his expression unreadable. "The king grows impatient," he said, voice low. "Either you erase him, or I will." Amaris' jaw tightened. "Leave us." Kale didn't move. "You're risking exile, or worse." "I said leave." For a heartbeat, Lucas thought Kale might strike her. Instead, the merman let out a derisive snarl and vanished into the gloom. Amaris exhaled sharply, then turned back to Lucas. "Listen carefully. The ritual doesn't have to take all of you. Just the parts that would make you a threat." Lucas forced his voice to work, the words distorted by the water. "What ... are you going to do?" Her golden eyes gleamed. "I'm going to give you a choice." From the folds of her hair, she withdrew a small, serrated knife made of black coral. Lucas recoiled, but she pressed a hand to his chest, holding him still. "Your memories of the surface, your name, your life before this, they have to go, but I can leave you intact. Your will, your instincts," she hesitated, "or you can try to escape now, before the binding consumes you, but you won't make it far." Lucas' mind raced to forget everything, his family, his past, even his own name, or to gamble on a doomed flight through an alien world. Amaris leaned closer, her lips nearly brushing his ear. "Choose quickly. They're coming." Somewhere in the distance, the water trembled with the sound of approaching voices. Dozens of them? The king's guards. Lucas met Amaris' gaze and made his decision. Her knife flashed downward. The pain was instant, white-hot, endless. Memories surged like a tidal wave, his mother's laughter, the sun on his face, the ship's deck tilting beneath his feet, then shattered, one by one, into nothingness. The last thing he remembered was her voice, whispering through the agony. "Breathe, Lucas, just breathe." Then silence, darkness, nothing. When his eyes opened again, the water felt lighter, the pain was gone, and so was his name. Amaris watched him, her expression unreadable. "Do you understand?" He did, not with words, not with memories, but with something deeper, instinct. She nodded, satisfied. "Good, then let's go." As they slipped from the cavern, the distant cries of the hunting party echoed behind them, and the man who was once Lucas Mercer followed without question. Into the dark. The ocean had teeth. He knew this now. The man who no longer remembered his name moved through the water with a predator's grace, his new body obeying instincts he didn't recall learning. Amaris led him through twisting kelp forests, their shadows stretching like grasping hands. Every flicker of movement in the gloom made his gills flare. Was it prey or pursuer? Kale found them at the edge of a thermal vent, his massive form emerging from swirling currents like a nightmare-given flesh. "The king has declared you both outcasts," he snarled, trident gleaming. "Your human is corrupted. The binding didn't take fully. I can smell his weakness." Amaris bared her teeth. "You rushed the ritual. This is your doing." The water between them crackled with tension. The nameless man tensed, muscles coiling. He didn't understand their words, but the threat was clear. Kel's gaze locked onto him. He's remembering. Look at his eyes. Amaris turned just as a flash of pain lanced through the man's skull. Sunlight on waves, a woman's laughter, the taste of salt and whiskey. Gone as quickly as it came. Kale lunged. The trident grazed the man's side, drawing black blood that coiled like smoke in the water. Amaris shrieked, a sound that made the ocean itself tremble, and raked her claws across Kel's face. "Run!" she screamed. The man didn't need translation. He surged through the water, Amaris at his side, their pursuers' roars shaking coral from ancient reefs. The ocean floor dropped away suddenly, revealing a yawning chasm where the water turned ink black. Amaris gripped his hand. "Trust me." They plunged into the abyss. The pressure crushed his chest. Strange lights flickered in the depths, not bioluminescence, but something older, something hungry. Kel's voice echoed from above. "You'll wish I'd killed you." Deeper they fell, until the man's vision swam with shadows and half-formed memories. A childhood bedroom, the smell of burning metal, a name that danced just beyond reach. Amaris jerked him sideways into a narrow crevice just as something enormous stirred in the blackness below. A pulse of ancient, terrible awareness vibrated through the water. "Don't move," Amaris breathed against his gills. "Don't even think." The thing in the deep uncoiled, and the hunt began anew. The water turned to ice in his gills. The crevice walls trembled as the thing below ancient, endless shifted its bulk. Amaris's fingers dug into the nameless man's arm hard enough to draw blood, her golden eyes wide with primal fear. A sound vibrated through the deep, a basso groan that resonated in their bones. Not a hunting cry, a yawn. The Leviathan was waking. Kel's furious presence still lingered above them, but even his wrath couldn't compete with the terror of the abyss. The merman hesitated at the chasm's edge, his trident trembling in his grip. "Amaris, you fool," he hissed. "That's his resting place." The nameless man felt the truth in his marrow. This was no ordinary beast. This was something the merfolk worshipped, or feared, perhaps both. Amaris pressed closer, her lips moving soundlessly against his ear. "When I move, follow. Don't look back." Below, the darkness rippled. Amaris kicked off. Just as a colossal tentacle, thick as a redwood and studded with barbed suckers, erupted from the depths. Kale barely dodged, his snarl turning to a shout of alarm as the appendage grazed his tail, stripping scales like peeling bark. The nameless man swam harder than he'd ever moved, his tail burning with effort. Amaris wove through jagged rock formations, her path erratic, not fleeing blindly, he realized, but hurting. Leading the Leviathan toward Kale? The merman's eyes flashed with understanding a second too late. "You treacherous." The tentacle snapped like a whip. Kale twisted, but the barb caught his flank, sending a cloud of silver blood blooming through the water. His scream was cut short as a second tentacle dragged him downward into the dark. Amaris didn't pause to watch. They breached the surface of a hidden cavern, gasping as their gills sealed and lungs remembered air. The nameless man collapsed onto slick stone, his body shuddering between form's tail splitting back into legs, scales retreating beneath skin. Amaris staggered against him, her own transformation leaving her trembling. "It won't hold him long," she panted, "but it'll buy us time." The man stared at his human hands, flexing fingers that moments ago had been webbed. "You sacrificed your own kind." The words surprised him. He hadn't known he could still speak. Amaris's smile was all teeth. "Kale was never my kind." Somewhere in the tunnels behind them, water churned violently. The Leviathan was displeased with its meal. She grabbed his face, her nails drawing blood. "Listen, your memories are returning." "That means the binding is failing." Her gaze flicked to the cavern's exit, where moonlight glimmered on distant waves. "You can leave now, before the king's hunters regroup." The man, Lucas, the name surged up like a drowning man's gasp, felt the ocean's call in his marrow. And the woman who'd remade him. "What happens to you if I go?" Amaris's silence was answer enough. The Leviathan's roar shook the cavern. Closer now, hungrier. Lucas stood on unsteady legs, salt water dripping from skin that no longer belonged entirely to land or sea. A choice. Again. Always. He reached for Amaris's hand. "Show me how to fight a king." Somewhere in the dark, the deep laughed. The tunnels beneath the ocean floor were not empty. Bones lined the walls, not fish, not seals, but merfolk. Skeletons fused into the rock like coral, jaws forever stretched in silent screams. Amaris moved through them without flinching, her fingers trailing over rib cages as if reading some invisible history. "This is where rebels are buried," she whispered, "where the king forgets his enemies." Lucas's bare feet slipped on something slick. A fresh corpse, its tail still twitching with residual life. The stench of iron flooded his newly human nose. Amaris crouched, peeling back the dead merman's clenched fist. A shard of black glass tumbled free. He made it further than most. Lucas swallowed bile. "What is this place?" The underbelly of the throne. She pressed the glass into his palm. It burned like dry ice. "Forged from the Leviathan's teeth, the only thing that can kill our kind." A roar shook the tunnels. Closer this time, the hunt was regrouping. Amaris's head snapped up. "They're using the vents." The wall exploded. Kale surged through the rock, his body a nightmare of half-healed wounds. The Leviathan had taken an eye, his left arm, but his remaining hand still clutched the trident. Traitor, blood foamed at his lips. The king wants your head on his. Lucas moved without thinking. The black glass slid between Kel's ribs like it was coming home. The merman's good eye widened. He gasped, not in pain, but in something almost like relief. His mouth moved, forming words that bubbled away into the water. Thanks. Then he was gone, collapsing into a swirl of ash and dissipating currents. Amaris stared at the empty water where her husband had been. He wanted to die, she realized. The Leviathan's venom ... It would have taken days. Another tremor. Louder. The king's guard is coming. Lucas tightened his grip on the shard. Will this work on the king? Amaris bared her teeth in something too sharp to be a smile. Let's find out. They swam upward through a shaft of glowing plankton toward the distant ripple of the throne room's underbelly. The water grew warmer, thick with the scent of rotting splendor. And then the ceiling gave way. They erupted into the court center, directly beneath the obsidian throne. The king looked down, his face twisting in recognition, in rage, just as Lucas drove the shard upward. The Leviathan's tooth met the king's heart. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the screaming began, not from the king, from the ocean itself. The throne room shattered. Merfolk scattered as cracks split the seabed, revealing the abyss below. The Leviathan's tentacles surged through, wrapping around the dying king, dragging him down into the dark. Amaris grabbed Lucas's wrist. Swim! They barely made it to the surface before the entire kingdom collapsed behind them, swallowed by the hungry deep. Panting on a moonlit shore, salt water and blood mingling between them, Lucas finally asked the question that had been burning in his chest. What now? Amaris looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Now, she said, tracing the gills that still fluttered weakly at his throat, we remember who you were. Somewhere in the waves, the Leviathan laughed, and the tide, as it always did, began to turn. The shore was not kind. Sand scraped against raw skin as Lucas collapsed, his body caught between two worlds, lungs gulping air while gills fluttered uselessly at his neck. Amaris crouched beside him, her own transformation incomplete. Moonlight caught the residual scales along her collarbones, the webbing between her fingers that hadn't fully receded. Breathe, she commanded, but it wasn't that simple. Every inhale was fire, every exhale a betrayal of the sea still singing in his blood. Lucas rolled onto his back, staring at the stars. What did you do to me? Amaris's silence was heavier than the ocean. Then, a whisper of movement in the waves. Not the Leviathan, not the king's remnants. Worse, figures emerged from the surf, their forms shifting between human and something other. The Forgotten. Merfolk who had abandoned the deep, their bodies caught in perpetual metamorphosis. Their leader, a gaunt figure with milky eyes and a jaw unhinged like a serpent's, stepped forward. Amaris, it rasped. You broke the covenant. She stood, her body thrumming with tension. The covenant was a lie. The Forgotten laughed, a sound like cracking ice. And yet, here you are, on our shore, with our kin. Its gaze slid to Lucas. He smells of the abyss. Of him. Lucas forced himself upright. I don't belong to anyone. The words sparked something in the Forgotten's hollow eyes. It tilted its head. No, it mused. You don't, do you? Amaris stepped between them. He's under my protection. Is he? The Forgotten's grin widened. Then why is the tide still calling him? As if on cue, the waves surged forward, wrapping around Lucas's ankles like shackles. The salt water burned, searing through nerve and bone. He cried out as his legs fused, scales erupting across skin. Amaris reached for him, but the Forgotten was faster. Its clawed hand clamped around Lucas's throat, dragging him toward the surf. The Leviathan marked you. It hissed, you are his now. Lucas's vision darkened at the edges. Somewhere beyond the roar of blood in his ears, he heard Amaris scream. Then silence. The Forgotten's grip loosened. Its milky eyes widened. A blade of black glass protruded from its chest. Behind it stood a figure cloaked in seaweed and shadow, their face obscured by a mask of barnacles. "Run," the stranger rasped. The Forgotten collapsed, dissolving into foam. The remaining outcasts scattered. Amaris stared at the masked figure, who? The stranger removed their mask. Lucas's breath caught. Kale? But not the Kale he remembered. This one was broken. Half his face was melted, his body a patchwork of scars and weeping wounds. The Leviathan's venom still working, still killing him. "You should have let me die," Kale snarled at Amaris. She didn't flinch. "You didn't give me the choice." Kale's ruined lips twisted. Then he turned to Lucas. "The Leviathan didn't mark you. He chose you." The waves trembled. In the distance, something colossal breached the surface. A single, massive eye reflecting the moon, watching, waiting. Kel's voice dropped to a whisper. "He wants a new king." And then the tide rose to claim them all. The cave was hidden behind a waterfall of rushing seawater, its walls shimmering with bioluminescent algae. Here, in this secret sanctuary, Amaris and Lucas found stolen moments between the chaos. She traced the fading scales along his collarbone, her golden eyes soft in the blue glow. "You're becoming human again," she murmured. Lucas caught her wrist, pressing her palm to his chest where his heartbeat thudded steady, mortal. "Not all of me." Amaris smiled, sharp teeth glinting. "No, not all." They had been running for weeks. The ocean was in turmoil after the king's fall, the Leviathan's presence growing stronger, its whispers curling through the waves like a summons. The Forgotten lurked in the shallows, and Kale broken. Furious Kale had become a ghost, appearing only to warn them of dangers Lucas couldn't yet see. But in this cave, none of that mattered. Amaris kissed him, and the taste of salt and storm filled his mouth. Her tail coiled around his legs, her body warm against his. Lucas tangled his fingers in her hair, pulling her closer, as if he could fuse them together through sheer will. "You're thinking too much," she teased, nipping his lower lip. "I'm thinking I don't want this to end," he admitted. Her smile faltered, because they both knew it would. The Leviathan's call grew louder. It came to Amaris in dreams, a voice like crushing depths, ancient and inevitable. "You are the last of the royal bloodline," it whispered. "The throne is yours." She woke gasping, seawater spraying from her lips. Lucas was already awake, watching her with dark, knowing eyes. "It's happening, isn't it?" he asked. Amaris didn't answer. She didn't need to. The ocean was choosing its queen. The coronation was not like the king's had been. There were no grand processions, no merfolk bowing in reverence. There was only the Leviathan, its massive eye watching from the abyss as Amaris hovered above the ruins of the throne. Kale emerged from the shadows, his body barely holding together. He placed the obsidian crown, the same one Lucas had shattered into her hands. It had reformed, as if the sea itself refused to let it die. "You'll hate it," Kale rasped, "but you'll be good at it." Amaris swallowed hard, then turned to Lucas. He was standing at the edge of the ruins, his legs fully human again, his gills sealed into scars. The transformation was complete. The ocean was rejecting him. The rescue came on a stormless morning. Amaris felt the vibrations first, a ship's hull cutting through the water, the rhythmic thrum of propellers. "Lucas," she whispered, shaking him awake. He knew instantly. They swam to the surface, breaking through the waves just as a Coast Guard helicopter circled overhead. "They've been looking for you," Amaris said. Lucas's throat tightened. "I can't. You have too." The helicopter spotlight hit them. Shouts echoed across the water. Amaris pressed her forehead to his. "Remember me," she begged. Then she let go. The rescue team pulled Lucas onto the deck, their voices a blur of questions he couldn't answer. "You're safe now," someone said. But he wasn't. He would never be safe again. As the ship turned toward shore, Lucas stumbled to the stern, staring at the empty waves. Then a flicker of gold beneath the surface. A single, shimmering scale floated up, catching the sunlight like a promise. Amaris was gone, but not forgotten. Years later, on a quiet beach, a man with sea-worn scars stood at the water's edge. And deep below, a queen with golden eyes watched the surface, waiting. The tide between them stretched, endless and unbroken. And somewhere, in the dark, the Leviathan smiled.